getting a new medication approved and available all around the world. Yeah, that can be a pretty complicated process, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A lot of moving pieces for sure.
So navigating all those different regulatory landscapes around the world, it's like,
It can be.
yeah,
It can be like going through a maze.
exactly. But thankfully, there is a group working to make it all smoother and safer for everybody.
Yeah.
The International Council for Harmonization, or ICH. We're going to take a deep dive today into how ICH works.
That's a great idea. I think a lot of people don't realize just how global ICH efforts really are. It brings together the regulatory authorities and pharmaceutical experts from the US, the EU, and Japan.
So is the goal to create just like a single unified approach to drug development?
Exactly, and regulations.
So instead of all these different companies having to,
Jump through hoops.
yeah, exactly, like a dozen different hoops in every different country.
Yeah, it's really about streamlining the process.
Yeah.
Saving time and resources and ultimately, getting those safe and effective medicines to the people that need them faster.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But how does it actually work? Like, what's the structure? Who are all the people involved?
Okay, good question. Well, as I mentioned, it brings together regulatory bodies. So you have the FDA here in the US,
Right.
the EMA in Europe, the PMDA in Japan, and alongside them we have experts from the pharmaceutical industry. They all collaborate to develop these guidelines that address all the different aspects of drug development.
Oh.
From preclinical research and clinical trials to manufacturing and quality control.
So it's like a partnership then
Yes, a true partnership.
between regulators and the industry to establish the best practices.
Absolutely. And the impact of these guidelines is pretty far-reaching. Now, while ICH itself doesn't have the authority to actually enforce the guidelines,
Okay.
its member regulatory authorities often adopt them, and that creates a much more harmonized global regulatory landscape.
That's interesting. So it's not like a top-down kind of...
No, it's more collaborative.
Sure.
It's a very collaborative approach, and that allows for flexibility to account for those regional differences. But we still maintain that high level of consistency. Think of it like a musical ensemble. Each instrument has its own unique voice, but they all play from the same score
Right.
to create one harmonious composition.
I like that analogy. So it's like the ICH guidelines are kind of like the sheet music.
Yes, exactly.
For drug development.
To make sure everybody's playing the same tune.
Yeah, and, these guidelines cover a lot of topics, right?
They do. They cover a wide range of topics. You have ICH E6, which provides guidance on good clinical practice,
Okay.
ensuring ethical and scientifically sound conduct of clinical trials. And then there's ICH Q8, which focuses on pharmaceutical development,
Right.
emphasizing a very science-based and risk-managed approach.
So it's not just about, checking off boxes and following rules.
No.
There's a real deep understanding required of the entire process.
Absolutely. And ICH guidelines are constantly evolving as well to keep pace with all the advancements in science and technology.
Of course.
Yeah, for instance, ICH E2B R3
Okay.
provides standards for electronic transmission of those individual case safety reports,
Oh, interesting.
which reflects the increasing use of electronic systems
Yeah.
in pharmacovigilance.
It seems like these guidelines cover pretty much every single stage
They do,
of a drug's journey,
every stage.
from the lab all the way to the patient.
That's right. It addresses everything from the initial discovery and development of a drug to its manufacturing, packaging, labeling,
Wow.
and even post-marketing surveillance. It's about ensuring that quality, safety, and efficacy at every step.
It really is like the whole life cycle.
Yeah, the whole life cycle.
I was looking at some of the materials that you provided me, and I saw that there's even a specific guideline for electronic signatures.
Oh, yeah.
So does this mean the pharmaceutical industry is finally getting away from all of that paperwork?
We're definitely moving in that direction. The FDA's acceptance of electronic signatures outlined in 21 CFR Part 11 actually aligns with ICH's push for electronic record keeping, and it really does demonstrate the increasing reliance on digital technologies.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a big shift.
It is a big shift. I'm curious, are there any areas in particular where the ICH guidelines have had like a really big impact?
One area that comes to mind is drug labeling.
Oh, okay.
ICH-Q8R2 actually outlines specific requirements for drug labeling, including the relationship between proprietary and established names.
Oh, okay.
This harmonization helps ensure that healthcare professionals and patients have clear and consistent information,
That's a good thing.
regardless of where it's manufactured or sold.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's reassuring. I've always wondered about those like long information leaflets that come with every prescription.
Right?
So the ICH plays a role in making sure those leaflets are, accurate and understandable.
Absolutely. ICH guidelines actually provide a framework for presenting complex medical information in a clear and concise manner, taking into account different languages and cultural contexts.
So it's not just about the science, it's also about...
It's about accessibility.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
goal is to empower patients and healthcare providers with the information they need to make informed decisions.
You mentioned dietary supplements earlier,
I did.
and I was surprised to learn that ICH guidelines also extend to those products.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that my vitamins and herbal remedies are subject to the same, like, strict standards as prescription drugs?
Well, the regulations for dietary supplements may differ from those for prescription medications,
I...
but ICH guidelines do influence those quality control measures.
Oh, okay.
For instance, ICH Q10, which focuses on pharmaceutical quality systems, promotes a risk-based approach to ensure the quality of all pharmaceutical products, and that includes supplements.
So even though those supplements might seem natural, there's still a big focus on making sure that they're safe.
Exactly. Quality and safety are important regardless.
Okay.
ICH guidelines aim to minimize those risks and ensure consistency, whether it's a prescription drug, an over-the-counter medication, or a dietary supplement.
That's good to know. It sounds like the ICH has its hands in every aspect of the pharmaceutical world,
Pretty much.
but it seems like a constantly moving target.
Hmm.
How does the ICH keep up with all of these rapid advancements,
Yeah.
in science and emerging technologies?
Yeah, it can be a challenge. It really is. But that's where ICH's collaborative structure really helps.
Okay.
The organization constantly monitors all those scientific advancements,
Okay.
and they're gathering feedback from all sorts of different stakeholders.
So it's not just the regulatory agencies and the pharmaceutical companies.
No, it's not just them. It's also healthcare professionals and patient advocacy groups.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like a constant feedback loop.
Right, to make sure everything is up to date.
Exactly. And this
Okay.
whole process can lead to, updates to existing guidelines
Yeah.
or even the development of completely new ones.
Oh, wow.
Like, for example, with the emergence of continuous manufacturing,
Yeah.
which is a new approach to drug production. ICH actually developed the Q13 guideline to address the, scientific and regulatory considerations of this evolving technology.
So they're not just trying to, cram it into the existing framework. They're creating new ones
Exactly.
as new technologies emerge.
We got to be adaptable, right?
Right.
And this ability to adapt and respond to all these emerging trends is essential for making sure that ICH stays relevant and that its guidelines remain, the gold standard for drug development globally.
Right. And speaking of new technologies, I was looking at this information on quality risk management.
Yeah.
And it seems really complicated.
It's a big area.
Yeah. So how do these ICH guidelines actually help companies figure this out?
So quality risk management is really all about proactively identifying and then mitigating any of those potential risks that could impact the quality of a drug product.
I see.
And ICH Q9 actually provides this systematic framework for companies to assess and manage those risks
Okay.
throughout the entire drug development life cycle.
So it's almost like they're getting out ahead of any potential problems.
It's about being proactive, not reactive.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So by implementing that risk-based approach, companies can really focus their efforts on the areas that pose the biggest risk to product quality and patient safety.
It's all about safety.
It is. It is.
But, even with all these guidelines in place, drug development is still so complex.
It is.
Are there any areas where the ICH is facing some particularly difficult challenges?
Well, one of the biggest challenges right now is personalized medicine,
Okay.
which is where treatments are tailored to a person's own unique genetic makeup.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, so this shift toward these individualized therapies requires a very different approach to clinical trials.
Right, because those traditionally rely on large groups of patients, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Relatively homogeneous patient populations.
So how is the ICH adapting to this whole idea of personalized medicine?
That's a great question, and you're right, it does require a much more nuanced approach to both the research and the regulation.
Yeah, because it's not just one size fits all anymore.
You got it.
So I imagine that must be tricky.
You're absolutely right. The ICH is exploring these new approaches to clinical trial design and data analysis
Oh, okay.
that can really accommodate those complexities of personalized medicine.
Okay.
And this includes adaptive trial designs, which actually allow for modifications
Oh, wow.
during the trial itself based on emerging data.
Okay.
And then we also have the use of real-world evidence to kind of supplement that traditional clinical trial data.
So it's much more customized and flexible than it used to be.
Exactly. And this shift requires ongoing collaboration and innovation to make sure we can properly evaluate and regulate these personalized therapies.
It sounds like the ICH is constantly changing to keep up with all these new developments in drug development.
Always evolving.
What other challenges are sort of on the horizon for them?
Well, another area of focus right now is the increasing complexity of those global supply chains.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, for pharmaceuticals. Ensuring the quality and integrity of drug products across that massive network of manufacturers and distributors and suppliers is a huge undertaking.
So it's not just about developing that safe and effective drug.
Right.
It's about making sure that the quality is maintained throughout the entire journey.
All the way to the patient, exactly.
Okay, so how does that actually happen?
Well, with globalization comes, increased complexity.
Right.
So ICH is working to strengthen those guidelines on good manufacturing practices and supply chain management
Okay.
to address these challenges and make sure that we have patient safety at every step.
So I imagine that takes a ton of international cooperation.
A ton.
Coordination.
Absolutely. And that is one of ICH's greatest strengths, the ability to bring all these different stakeholders together from all around the world
Yeah,
to work together to find solutions that benefit everyone.
that's great.
It is.
Well, we've covered so much today in this deep dive, from the history and structure of ICH to its role in, harmonizing drug development
Yeah.
and regulation globally. But for somebody who is just now learning about the ICH for the first time,
Right.
what's the one thing you would want them to take away from all this?
I think the most important takeaway is that when you see that ICH logo on your medication, it means that there's a global commitment to quality, safety, and scientific rigor.
It's really good to know.
It's a symbol of collaboration, innovation, and, a shared dedication to advancing human health.
So we've talked about personalized medicine. We've talked about global supply chains.
Right.
But I'm curious, what other innovations are out there that are kind of shaping the future of drug development?
Yeah.
And how is the ICH responding to those?
Well, one area that's generating a lot of excitement and some debate, too, is the use of artificial intelligence
Oh, wow.
in drug discovery.
AI in drug development.
Yes.
That sounds so futuristic.
It is very cutting edge.
But I imagine it also creates some, challenges for the regulators.
You're right. With any powerful new technology, there are always ethical and regulatory considerations. We have to address those. So, for example, how can we be sure that those AI algorithms are free from bias?
Right.
How do we protect patient privacy when we're using these massive data sets to train the AI models?
Yeah, those are really important questions.
They are, and these are the kinds of questions that ICH is dealing with now
Wow.
as AI becomes more common in drug development.
So it's not just about embracing the potential of AI, but it's also about making sure that it's used responsibly and ethically.
You got it.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that's why the ICH is working to develop guidance on using AI in this way, making sure that these powerful tools are used to really benefit patients while also maintaining those high standards of safety and ethical conduct.
It sounds like ICH is always trying to stay ahead of the curve, anticipating, what that next big innovation is going to be.
We have to always be looking forward.
And, adapting their guidelines to meet those challenges.
That is a core part of the mission.
Yeah.
The pharmaceutical landscape is constantly evolving.
It really is.
And the ICH has to be agile and responsive to make sure that its guidelines are still relevant and effective.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot today, from the history and the structure of the ICH to its role in harmonizing drug development and regulation globally.
Right, a lot of information.
But for someone who is just now hearing about the ICH for the very first time, what's the most important thing you'd want them to remember?
I think the most important thing is to understand that the ICH is a force for good in medicine.
Yeah.
The work that they do may be behind the scenes, but it has a huge impact on the lives of patients all over the world.
It's amazing.
It is. By promoting that international collaboration, scientific rigor that focus on patient safety,
Right.
the ICH helps to ensure that the medications we rely on are developed and manufactured to the highest possible standards.
That's a really powerful message. So when you see that ICH logo, it represents this global commitment to quality and safety
It does.
and the advancement of human health.
Yeah, it's all about improving lives through safe and effective medicines.
And to our listeners out there, if you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend that you go to the ICH website.
That's a great resource.
There's a lot of information there about their guidelines, the work that they're doing, and how they're really shaping the future of pharmaceuticals.
It really is a fascinating world to explore.
It is. And, the more that you know about the ICH, the more you're going to appreciate the work that they do in safeguarding public health.
Absolutely.
Well, that's going to bring us to the end of our deep dive into the world of the ICH. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We hope you learned a lot about this organization and their important mission.
We did.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.